On the afternoon of March 12, 1968, filming stopped on a major Hollywood production. Not because of equipment failure or scheduling conflicts. Filming stopped because Marlon Brando stood up, looked at the director, and said something that made everyone on that soundstage stop moving. The production was 3 weeks into principal photography, a period drama, substantial budget, a director who'd made 2 successful films in 5 years. He was talented, demanding, running behind schedule, the kind of pressure that makes people sharp. The studio had been calling, twice that morning already. Brando had signed on because of the script, not the director. The story was good, the character complex, the money acceptable. He'd worked with difficult directors before and knew how to manage them. Show up early, do the work, stay professional, leave when the day ended. That was the arrangement. That was always the arrangement. The crew was mixed. Veterans who'd been in the industry 20 years and newer people still learning the rhythms of a major production. Among them was David Chen, 23 years old, working his second big film. He was good at his job, quick to learn, always early to set, the kind of person who asked questions not to challenge but to understand, the kind of person directors usually appreciated. Usually. On March 12th, they were shooting a scene in a large ballroom set. Complex lighting, multiple camera angles, period chandeliers that had taken the rigging crew 2 full days to hang and wire properly. The kind of setup where one mistake could cost hours. Everyone knew it, the director especially. He'd been on set since 6 a.m., dark circles under his eyes like bruises, coffee cup perpetually in his hand, never quite empty, never quite full. The studio had called at 7:15 and again at 9:30. The same message both times. They were behind schedule, they needed to catch up, they needed to move faster. The pressure was showing, in the director's voice when he gave notes, in the way he paced between takes, in how he'd started snapping at people over small things that wouldn't have bothered him 2 weeks ago. They were between setups now, adjusting lights for the next angle. The crew moved with practiced efficiency. The gaffer giving quiet instructions, people nodding, making adjustments. David Chen was on a ladder, tweaking one of the practical lights in one of the chandeliers. He had a small notebook in his back pocket where he wrote down things he learned. Later, when he got home, he'd transfer the notes to a larger notebook he kept by his bed. That's the kind of person he was. The gaffer had told him which light needed adjusting. Number 7, second chandelier from the left, needs to be warmer. David had repeated it back to confirm. The gaffer had nodded. David had climbed the ladder. He was focused on the work. Careful. The chandelier was delicate, expensive, rented from a prop house that charged by the day. He was doing exactly what he'd been told to do. The director was at the monitor, reviewing the previous take with the DP. They were watching a particular moment, playing it back twice, the director pointing at something on screen. Then he looked up, saw David on the ladder, his hand adjusting the light. Something in the director's face changed, tightened. "What are you doing?" The director's voice cut across the set like a blade. The soundstage went quiet. Conversations died mid-sentence. Tools stopped moving. People turned. David looked down from the ladder, his hand still on the light fixture, confused. "I'm adjusting the number 7 light like..." "I didn't tell you to touch that." The director was already moving, walking toward the ladder, his clipboard still in his hand, his coffee cup abandoned on the monitor desk. "Who told you to touch that light?" The gaffer said, "I don't care what the gaffer said." The director's voice was getting louder with each word, but underneath the volume was something else, the strain of 3 weeks behind schedule, studio executives who'd made it clear his next film depended on this one coming in on time and on budget. The fear, deep and growing, that he was losing control of his own set. "I'm the director. I make the decisions. I decide what gets adjusted and when." David climbed down from the ladder, his movements careful, deliberate, trying not to make things worse. His face was flushed red. Behind him, the gaffer took a small step forward, then stopped, thought better of it. The crew was watching now, all of them. The script supervisor's pen had stopped moving. A grip who'd been coiling cable had frozen mid-motion. Someone near the back shifted their weight, and the floor creaked. The director kept going, his words coming faster. "Do you have any idea how much time you just wasted? That light was set. It was perfect. It was exactly where it needed to be. And you decided, what? That you knew better than the DP? Better than me? I was just following. You were being incompetent." The director's free hand was opening and closing at his side, a tick he didn't seem aware of. If you can't follow simple instructions, if you can't understand the chain of command on a professional set, then maybe you're working on the wrong film. The words landed like physical blows. David stood there, absorbing them, 60 people watching him take the hit. A camera operator looked away. The script supervisor's pen had stopped moving. A grip who'd been coiling cable had frozen mid-motion. Someone near the back shifted their weight, and the floor creaked. Across the soundstage, Marlon Brando was sitting in his chair. He'd been reading a book, some thick paperback with a cracked spine. The book was still open in his lap, his finger marking his place. But his eyes weren't on the page anymore. They were on the director. His face was completely still, watching. The director's voice got tighter, higher. "You know what your problem is? You don't think. You just do whatever someone tells you without understanding the bigger picture. And that makes you a liability. That makes you dangerous." Brando closed his book. The sound was quiet, but in the silence of the soundstage it carried like a gunshot. He set it carefully on the chair beside him. Stood up. Not fast, not slow. Just stood. Then he walked toward them. His footsteps were the only sound, measured, even. The DP's hand slowly lowered from his viewfinder. The script supervisor looked up from her notebook. The boom operator turned his head. The director, still focused on David, didn't notice at first. Then someone's eyes shifted. The gaffer straightened slightly, and the director turned. Brando stopped a few feet away from them, close enough to be part of the conversation, far enough not to crowd. He looked at David for a moment, met his eyes, then turned to the director. "What did he do wrong?" The director blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The kid. What did he do wrong?" "He adjusted a light that was already set." "Who told him to?" "That's not who told him to." The director's jaw shifted. His clipboard moved to his other hand. "The gaffer. But I'm the director. I decide." He followed instructions. "He should have checked with me. He's a lighting tech." Brando's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "He takes orders from the gaffer." The director's face was starting to flush. He could feel everyone watching, feel his authority slipping. "Marlon, this is between me and my crew. Apologize." The word dropped into the room like a stone into still water. "What?" "Apologize to him." The director's hand tightened on his clipboard. His throat moved. "I'm not apologizing for maintaining standards." Brando walked to his chair, picked up his jacket, started putting it on. The director watched him, not quite believing what he was seeing. "What are you doing?" "Leaving." "You can't leave. We're in the middle of shooting." Brando finished putting on his jacket, looked at the director. 10 seconds. The producer was moving before Brando finished the word, dropping his clipboard, rushing from the monitors towards them. Brando said "two" and started walking towards the door. The crew was frozen, a camera operator's hand still on his rig, not moving, the script supervisor's pen hovering over her notebook, someone's coffee cup halfway to their mouth. 3. The producer reached them, slightly out of breath. "Marlon, let's talk about this." Brando said 4 without looking at him. His hand went to the door handle. The director was breathing differently now, shorter breaths, his eyes moving between Brando and the producer and the 60 people watching. His clipboard was shaking slightly in his hand. "This is ridiculous," the director said, but his voice had changed, higher, thinner. 5. Brando's fingers wrapped around the handle. The assistant director stepped forward, hands up like he was approaching something dangerous. "Maybe we should all just—" 6. The director's clipboard hit the floor. He didn't pick it up. The producer had him by the arm now, pulling him slightly away, hissing something urgent that no one else could hear. The director wasn't responding, just standing there, watching his set dissolve around him. Brando said 7, and the door clicked. Not open yet, just unlocked. The mechanism loud in the silence. "You're bluffing," the director said. He wasn't looking at Brando anymore. He was looking at the gaffer, at the DP, at faces that wouldn't meet his eyes. 8. The producer's face was white. He was talking faster now, words tumbling over each other, but the director wasn't hearing him. He was watching Brando, watching the space between staying and leaving get smaller with every second. Brando said 9 and pushed the door. It opened 6 inches. Light from the hallway cut across the soundstage floor. Someone in the back coughed. It echoed. The director looked at that light, at Brando halfway out, at David still standing there, looking like he wanted to disappear, at the crew not moving, not breathing, all of them watching him make a choice. "Wait." Brando stopped. The door stayed open. He didn't turn around. The director's shoulders dropped. His hands were shaking now. He looked at David, at this kid who'd just been doing his job, who was 23 and probably scared, and definitely didn't deserve this. "I apologize." The words came out quiet, rough. Brando turned his head slightly, looked back, said nothing. The director understood. He raised his voice. "I apologize. I was frustrated. I took it out on you. That was wrong." Brando looked at David. "You accept that?" David nodded, couldn't seem to find words. Brando let go of the door. It swung closed with a soft click. He took off his jacket, walked back to his chair, sat down, picked up his book, opened it to where he'd left off. "Let's work," he said. The soundstage came back to life, slowly. People moved to their stations like they were waking up from something. The director walked to the monitors, picked up his clipboard from the floor. The producer wiped his face with his hand. Nobody said anything about what had just happened, but things changed. The director's voice was different for the rest of the day. Quieter, more questions, fewer commands. When he gave David a note 3 hours later about a different light, he added, "Please," and waited for confirmation before moving on. David noticed other things too. The way crew members met his eyes when they passed, the way the gaffer squeezed his shoulder during the next break, the way the air on set felt different, lighter. When the day ended, David approached Brando as he was leaving. "Mr. Brando, I wanted to thank you." "You don't need to thank me." "But you almost walked off the film." Brando looked at him. "I was walking. If he hadn't apologized, I'd be gone." He picked up his bag, walked toward the exit. David stood there, watching him go. The production wrapped 6 weeks later, on time. The film released the following year. David Chen stayed in the industry for 35 years. On March 12, 1968, Marlon Brando gave a director 10 seconds to apologize. The director apologized. The production continued. Years later, when David Chen taught cinematography, he would tell his students about technical precision and artistic vision and the importance of understanding light. But sometimes, near the end of a semester, he'd tell them about March 12, 1968. Not as a lesson, just as something that happened. He'd tell them about being 23 and making a mistake that wasn't a mistake, about a director who was under pressure and took it out on the wrong person, about how it felt to stand there while 60 people watched you get humiliated for doing your job. And then he'd tell them about Marlon Brando standing up, not to make a speech, not to lecture anyone about respect or professionalism or how sets should operate, just to draw a line, to say this is where it stops, and to be willing to walk away from a major film to enforce that line. The door was half open, light from the hallway cutting across the soundstage, Brando halfway out, and I remember thinking, he's actually leaving. He's really doing this. For me. For someone he barely knew. The students would lean forward. This was the part they wanted to hear, the dramatic moment, the confrontation. But David would always emphasize the same thing. It wasn't dramatic, he'd say. Brando wasn't trying to make a point or teach anyone a lesson. He just saw something wrong and stopped it. That's all. And when it was over, he went back to reading his book like nothing had happened. Someone would always ask, did the director ever apologize again after that day? David would shake his head. We never talked about it. None of us did. But he was different after that, more careful, more aware. And I think that's what Brando understood, that sometimes people need to see consequences to change. Words don't always work, but watching Marlon Brando walk toward that door, that worked. One semester, a student asked, "Did you ever thank him properly